Awesome. We are live, and today I am joined with Nate, all the way from Richmond, Virginia. Thank you for saying yes today, brother. How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully. Blessed to be here. Blessed to be alive. Blessed to be sharing space with you today, Kyle.
Massive, brother. We were just saying it's so cool to be able to connect with someone on the other side of the planet, and there's so much that I want to get stuck into in this conversation today. But it'd be nice to just start with like a little bit about where you are, what you do, what some of the things that you're currently doing for your work, for the spaces that you weave in. Yeah, we can just start there, and then we'll flow out from there.
Incredible, yeah. So, first off, my name is Nate Nathaniel Baumgardner. I am a plant medicine coach, facilitator, breathwork coach. I have a lot of roles and a lot of hats. Foundationally, like I I'm here to heal. I'm here to serve
Mm,
people in whatever that looks like and support people in finding a space of safety and authenticity in this world that often feels incredibly chaotic and disorganized and overwhelming at times. And so, yeah, like that looks like different ways and different formats and modalities in practice. But really, when it comes to like what I work to embody, what I work to show up as, is primarily like as a healer, as a facilitator, and to be able to grant people that permission to live a truly free and integral life in
mm.
whatever that looks like for them. So
Can I ask, what is your personal or spiritual philosophy for life, if you have one?
I it's I mean, it's quite simple. And I've found this through plant medicine, and through doing the reading spiritual texts, primarily the Kybalion
Mm,
in the Hermetic principles. It's really just understanding that we are all one. Like we are have this aspect of ourself that I call our soul, that is unborn, that is undying, and that exists in direct relationship with God. That is like our conduit to source consciousness, to the divine, and that we have this physical form, we have this 3D meat suit that exists that we choose to incarnate into, from that space of singularity as a soul, and that we get to come down here and to manifest in the physical form in order to move through our karma, in order to move through the different aspects that we're being called to heal and to process and to transcend. And in that, we find our gifts, we find our dharma, and how we're meant to show up and to, in healing our own karma, we're able to embody in new ways how we're meant to support others. And I I've come to do more like reading into Gnosticism and Christianity, and have done looked at Taoism and Buddhism. I don't follow a particular religion per se, but I do love reading spiritual philosophies overall, because in each religion there is so much wisdom that can be lost when we attach to the dogma or the particular egoic mind attachment to some of the precepts or the limiting aspects that are contained within those religions. So that's my personal philosophy. I know that, like, particularly where we are in society today, like I see so many people now becoming Christian who were just in the New Age spiritual space and didn't necessarily have a belief system. I don't consider myself a Christian. I work to embody Christ consciousness, as I believe that Christ was an avatar of source consciousness of God. Yet in that, I don't necessarily feel that I would attach myself to the label of Christianity per se.
I love that, brother. Yeah, really well articulated, and we're definitely in alignment with that too. I have a background in Buddhist philosophy, so I have some really good teachers in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but they are not into identifying with the word Buddhism. It's more about how do we articulate what consciousness is, how the human being fits into it, how do we unfold, how do we get closer to source, and how do we, like you said, get closer to our Dharma, the reason our soul came here in the first place. And interesting, you talked about the Hermetic principles. That was something that's been coming up for me lately, is all is mind. And that was the first, I think that's the first principle, was like all is mind, and just really understanding that, and why things like meditation are so important, so that we have this kind of, I guess, not only understanding the nature of our mind, but some kind of mastery over our attentional system, right? And understanding what this human mechanism is. So I'm right there with you, bro. What's interesting is I really want to dive into psilocybin mushrooms and microdosing. I think it's such an interesting subject. But one thing I noticed was you've worked with the enlifted system and Mark England, and that was someone that I listened to on Paul Chick's podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you know who Paul Chick is.
I did the first year of the Czech Academy before I ended up going a different direction with my coaching. But yeah, I love Paul Czech. I've worked with some of his top coaches,
Wow.
and yeah, no, his system is absolutely incredible and one of the most comprehensive when it comes to the physical body and the mind body connection, and mind body spirit, integral. Like he's phenomenal, and so I'm like deeply reverent of Paul Czech's work.
Yeah, so am I. I love Paul. I'm a Czech study as well, so I've done the training, and
Yeah.
that's a big part of what I do is working as a holistic lifestyle coach with people. And I listened to that podcast with Mark England, and I was like, wow, this guy's onto it. Very practical, very straight to the point, and very like a lot of tools that are really useful with working with people and helping people get unstuck. Even just these fundamentals around, like, most people's breath is trapped in their chest. How can we get into the stories and start to change some of the narratives in our head if our breath is trapped in our chest? We need to be breathing low and slow. We need to look at the words. We need to start to identify some of the stories and stuff. So I haven't done any like actual study with the enlifted system, but I have studied it deeply. Like I'll listen to a podcast and take notes and reflect on it, and how can I implement this stuff. What has working with the enlifted system done for you, and what are the things that stand out from that system that have, I guess, changed the way that you show up in your personal life and with coaching?
That's a beautiful question. Yeah, you previously mentioned the first hermetical principle, which is all is mind, and so what I find the enlifted system gets to is that we have these words, and not just the words that we speak externally, but the ones that we speak internally, the ones that are going through our mind at all times, whether we're meditating or we're doing breath work or we're deep in a psilocybin journey or wherever we are. Like, words are foundational because they are these abstract symbols that we use to express ourselves in whatever language that we learned. And so we have these words that create an emotional experience in our body. And so in that connection, as we sort of reinforce different words, we can choose to have those intentionally create an empowered reality, because our words are reflective of our thoughts that influence our perception, because those words, when they're formed into sentences, into paragraphs, create an emotional experience that, when projected onto the 3D hologram, is our that is our how we are perceiving reality. That is our personal quote unquote truth. That is really not a true truth, but is just how we're taking in and filtering out all of the different experiences to make sense of what we go through day to day. But that creates different stories that we have about what's right, what's wrong, how the world works, that is reinforced as we go through time, and that could align with the capital R reality that is true and real and, unchanging, or it could be very far from that reality. And what we're looking to do with the enlifted system is to get as close as possible to have the words that we're speaking to ourselves and to others, whether internally or externally, be in coherence with what is real and what is true. And so over time, as we learn to do that, we're able to, shift from, through our trauma, the things that we take on from our parents, the things we take on from our society, our religion, all of these different imprints that come about that may create a certain limitation or a certain emotional experience that we come to take as like our baseline experience. We're able to move through that, and we're able to process that through how we're speaking to ourselves and how we're speaking to others, using this language technology to bring awareness to how we're communicating, so that we're able to create the most empowering reality possible. And so it's in that refinement and in that self-awareness that we can both like be conscious of our own limitations, of our own like where we want to show up, and then in learning that and applying it to ourselves, we can, should we choose to, like coach it and support others in shifting their stories through shifting how they use their language, and enabling them to shift from like a victim mindset, a victim mentality, into one that is allows people to be the architect of their own life.
Oh, I love that. And there's such a big piece there on, before we start to coach someone and bring in the vision setting, it's like seeing where they're stuck, like seeing what these limiting stories are, and like some of the subconscious programs that are actually keeping them trapped before we start setting goals and stuff. And I guess like when we get somebody unstuck, or we start to see through the lies of some of the stories we're telling ourselves, and we start to break free from like the chains of like a victim mentality, and some of these glass ceilings that we're putting on ourselves. What are some of the useful things that we can do as far as like vision setting? And then now like I'm looking where I want to go, and I'm actually starting to feel that future reality that I'm trying to like pull myself into, right? Because we're creative beings. This is like the quantum physics aspect. This is Dr. Joe Dispenza. It's like, we're creative beings who are always creating our reality. Is there anything that comes up for you as far as like, what are some of the keys for helping people to carve out a vision? Yeah.
Yeah, like one of the things that I see very frequently in the people that I work with who come to me a lot of the time from the new age spiritual space that's all about presence and not wanting too much and just being in the moment, is a lack of clarity on what they want their life to look like. It's not like I just want to be in like where I am right now, and like everything that is happening to me is perfect. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not where you want to be. You want to be making 10 grand a month in your coaching business, and you're not making any money in your coaching business, and you're doing this job that you hate, and you're with this partner that you can't stand. And so being present in that experience will give you a little bit a sense of peace in this moment, but you're still in this reality that's misaligned for what you're looking to achieve. So like the first step is just like getting to the awareness that like I am unsatisfied with my current reality. And like it's okay to admit that, because it allows you from the ego level, like we all have this ego, and like we don't want to be ruled by our ego, obviously, but we want to build this relationship with it as this friend, as this like collaborator that is sort of like our heart is what's leading the ego. And so from there, we can connect with our heart and see what our heart truly wants. And a practice that I really love to guide my clients through is the perfect day. And this is something that we do like on our coaching calls, even where I'll give people 20 minutes to just write out like, you know, you have no limitation. You can do whatever you want with your time, your energy. You have, you can even unlimited financial resources, and just write out what your, 8 hours from when you wake up, or 12 hours from when you wake up to when you go to bed, what that looks like in what you're doing in like your friendships, in your romantic partnership, in your sense of fulfillment and purpose, and what you're doing with your time to bring value to other people's lives. And just allow yourself to really dream, and even more importantly, to get specific, because a lot of the times people speak very vaguely, like, oh, I want to be around a group of like-minded individuals. Like, great, that's cool. What does that look like? What values do you share with these people? What environment are you in with these people? Is it a mountainous environment? Is it a forest? Is it by a creek? Is it, near a campfire? Like, get as specific as possible, so that when you get that all done, I'll have people read through it. And this is a part of the enlifted process, is to like read through it normal speed, then slow it down to 60% speed, and then slow it down, and at each comma, at each period, add in the breaths. Deep breath, deep diaphragmatic breath, so that it can land in your nervous system. And like, as we go through this process, what I'll have people do at the end of that slow, conscious, connected breath read is to drop into the somatic sense of what that feels like in your body. Because when we anchor into an experience in our nervous system, that's really when we can start to attune our aura, our energetic field, to that new reality. And the more that we can familiarize our nervous system with that experience, the more that we can begin calling it in. And the more that we can begin finding real, tangible, grounded steps to moving towards that reality. And some of those steps are small. Some of those steps are like, all right, meditating every day, or doing breath work every day, like having a consistent spiritual practice that allows you to anchor in. Some of them are massive and like are going to look like blowing up your life. Like I quit a job working for the Department of Homeland Security, and started being a psychedelic coach, which some people think is a very bizarre shift, which I'll admit is. And like it will cause you, it will allow you, when you find safety in your own nervous system, to allow your heart to truly dream. It will give you the capacity to do both the small and the big things that are going to bring you closer and closer every single day to manifesting that reality. And, again, I'm going to harp on the New Age spiritual like philosophy, because I think it is very flawed in that, like, all we have to do is, think about this thing and we'll manifest it. It's like, no, like, this shit requires action. This shit requires like really bold, brave steps that we get to take in order to manifest. Like, that is the true practice of magic, is taking action.
Absolutely, brother. Man, that was beautiful. That was a beautiful detailing and a really massive key for a lot of people. Like, if you can just take what you just said, that's really good. I'm running a 6-week meditation course. It starts in about a week. And one of the things that came to me was this image. And part of what I teach is like, and I imagine this student in the middle of like a hall, like in the middle of a temple or something. And on the left side of them is like all the skeletons in the closet and all the shadow stuff and all the shadow work that we need to do to clean up the unconscious mind and the subconscious patterns. And on the right is all the attunement work. It's the accessing these latent qualities of consciousness that are latent within the human system, opening the heart, opening the throat, like getting to these deeper levels and being able to be with what is. And like you said, the power of actually being with what is. But then in front of us is the mirror. In front of us is what are we creating day to day. And the last podcast that I released was with a woman named Karalia, and she's a Tantra yoga teacher. And in Tantra, this is the idea. It's like, yes, liberation, yes, awakening, and also enjoy your life and carve out a beautiful life for yourself. Why wouldn't you do that? And why wouldn't you do that and allow that to be something that's supporting your community, and allow that to be something that's in this human vehicle moving in a direction that makes sense for you and your family. And so harnessing our creative ability is so key. And I'm right there with you with the new age spirituality, because there are so many partial views in what spiritual growth really is. And I think the new age spirituality glosses over how hard it is to actually have a real authentic path of self mastery where we are genuinely doing the work, cleaning ourselves up, becoming more mature, aware beings, but also taking massive responsibility, like radical responsibility for our life and everything that's going on and what we're creating. So I'm right there with you, bro. And it's yeah, that was such a great detailing. I'll have to try that carving out the beautiful day. That's really cool. I like that. So I want to get into mushrooms, and this has actually been a big part of my journey as well. Paul Stamets, he's the famous mycologist guy. I'm sure you know who Paul Stamets is. He says that psilocybin mushrooms should be recategorized as a therapeutic medicine. And there's been all of these studies going on, and I'm not sure what the legal status is over there. I think in New Zealand we have one psychiatrist this year who is able to prescribe psilocybin mushrooms to rare cases, but it's still a Schedule One, Class One drug here. But I know in the John Hopkins University, they have done all these studies, and I think there's a huge percentage of the people who they rate the psilocybin mushroom experience in the top three most profound spiritual experiences they've ever had. And then when they touch base with these people, like a year later, 2 years later, they can still see the benefits from that experience. They're kinder people, they're more compassionate, they're more at peace with who they are, and they can still remember that experience, and it brings them back to this kind of like, wow, that really moved the needle. That was a really transformational experience. So I guess my first question is like, how did you come to be so involved with psilocybin mushrooms, and what do you think is so powerful about them?
Yeah, I thank you for that question. I love the opportunity to tell my story in my journey with psychedelics, because I I use them in a recreational way growing up. Like I went to a small hippie high school like back in the early aughts, and would party with them, and like I'd have interesting trippy experiences, but would be drinking and would be smoking weed and doing other drugs. And so it was a less intentional relationship with them, yet I still saw the power that they held. I just wasn't necessarily aware of the depth of like what's possible when we combine them with these different practices, and when we actually build a relationship with them as like an intrinsic being with its own consciousness. Because like mushrooms have their own spiritual consciousness. I believe that mushrooms are like they are sentient, just like the same way the earth is sentient. Like mushrooms are this web. Mycelium plays so many different roles within nature of like sharing, nutrients and different like capacity to support nature in like in between trees and in between the different ecology of our planet. And so I I think of mushrooms as like this web. And in the web of how it supports nature, that web also allows us as, sentient beings to connect with the web of consciousness, like that all
Yeah.
is mind. Like it allows us to experience our mind as just as this capacity to link with the universal mind. and to dissolve into this state of oneness. And I had my first like really conscious mushroom experience when I was living in Amsterdam, on 20 grams of wet truffle mushrooms. And I know I had been, I'd been studying Stanislav Grof and Paul Stamets and Terence McKenna, and made the choice to like, all right, I don't know exactly know what's gonna happen, but I'm gonna, take the 20 grams and I'm gonna go and just lie in my bed and see what comes up. It's like the 5 grams alone in a dark room, that Terence McKenna talks about. 20 grams of wet mushrooms is approximately like 5 grams of dried mushrooms, but it just is absorbed by the body a little bit differently. And so I had this very deep experience that was challenging to integrate, yet I had prepared for it with like putting yogurt aside just in case like the experience got too intense, because that was the time of like Arrowhead and doing all of this different research online, and had heard that like if your trip gets too intense, just eat some yogurt. And there was a time as I had dropped into the experience and was connecting with these different beings that were sort of showing me what was possible in this space to connect with the metaphysical realm, that was like, this is really uncomfortable. I'm going to go and like, ease this because it's really fucking intense. And they're like, yeah, you can do that if you want, but why are you even here? And I was like, okay, message understood. And so like coming out of that experience, I honestly didn't do much with it. Like I didn't really have the template for like what integration looked like, but I knew that it was there. Like I knew I was able to connect with these spirit guides and these beings within the mushroom realm through taking these large doses. And that was like back in 2015. And so, I went through my life. That was, I had a small nonprofit in Amsterdam and ended up coming back here to the US and getting a job in emergency management. And then in 2020, was working for FEMA, was living out in Denver. I had this like amazing, I still have the condo outside of Denver. But like on the surface, like my life looked amazing. I had this well-paying job working for the Department of Homeland Security and was traveling a lot and like had a lot of status and a career track to, a 10-figure role, managing my own team. And so it was this ego fulfillment. And I was good at what I did and got a lot of perceived value from thinking that I was making a difference in doing this work as an emergency management analyst. But when the pandemic hit, like I didn't have to go into the office anymore, and was sort of put in this space where like I had a lot more work to do because FEMA had this role as the lead federal agency responsible for pandemic operations, yet I didn't have to go into the office and put on the suit and tie and the mask that we all wear when we do this job that really isn't in alignment with our soul's purpose. And so it was in this place where the cognitive dissonance was growing, and it was creating this sense of it's like it started off as just like a little bit of uneasiness, but it really grew into this state of dread that I was like, well, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why am I feeling this so much fear that like, I had this sense that, what was being promoted as the next Black Plague wasn't actually as deadly as, they were making it out to be. And so like, I knew the fear that I was feeling wasn't in relation to all of the propaganda that was being pushed down everybody's throat, even though I was largely part of that machine that was in that disseminating that information, or at least aggregating the data that was used to promote it. But I knew that something was off, and it was around that time that a friend of mine gave me some LSD. And now LSD is a synthetic drug, yet it's derived from the mold that is grown on barley and wheat called ergot. And it is essentially like a synthesized form of a fungus. So I consider LSD, though different from the mycelium, to be a part of that same realm, and to give you the capacity to connect with that realm just in a different way, in a different experience. And so I, was, in doing even more research, made the choice to have another heroic dose experience, because I had avoided psychedelics from like when I joined the federal government until that point, because I was afraid I was going to get fired, and they're illegal, and so just play it safe and don't do this. But I knew something needed to change, and I knew psychedelics were going to be an avenue that could get me to that point of deep self-awareness. And so as I like led up to this ceremony, I was doing the research. I was, purifying my body, was fasting from alcohol and, no sex, was, cleaning my diet. And I got to the point where like I was just like, it was growing. That tension was growing because I knew I was going to see some deep shit. And so, on the day of that I set aside for my journey, like I was holding the tab of LSD in my hand, and I got to like the Neo red pill, blue pill. I knew I had that choice to make. And so, I put the tab of LSD under my tongue, put on my face mask, put on East Forest Music for Mushrooms, and just lay on my bed. And I had this experience of just dropping into this space where I saw all of the pain that I had caused people throughout my life, whether consciously or unconsciously. And this is like coming up into the experience before I was even really like hallucinating or having any visuals. But then as I got to this point where like the medicine was starting to really move in my body, like I hear this voice that, is I am now understand as like the Godhead communicating to me, is like, do you want to continue punishing yourself for all of this, or do you want to go in? And I want to go in. I want to see all of it. I want to see the ways that my life is out of alignment. And so I had this experience over the next 4 hours of like dying and being reborn, and dying and being reborn, and seeing all of the ways that my life that I was on, the trajectory, the timeline that I was living, was not the one I was meant to be on. And, I come out of that experience and drink some water. Like I'm just still under the effect of the medicine, because LSD is like, it's, like an 8 to 10 hour experience, but I'd sort of gone through the peak of it, and I'm standing there like facing myself in the mirror. And I see myself as this 80-year-old man having lived the life that I was currently leading. And I just saw the pain in my eyes of like the self-imposed suffering. Yes. And I hear God say like, well, what do you want to do now? And I was like, well, what am I meant to be doing? And I get a one-word answer that was like, serve. Serve. And so the following weeks were like a deep knowing, yet a resistance to the fact that I knew I needed to quit my job. And the fear around that, and the like, well, what do I do if I don't, if I'm not doing this thing that I thought I was going to be doing for the rest of my life? And I thought I was going to be on this track to like playing a leadership role and doing all of these things. And so had been listening to Paul Chek's podcast, had been listening to Mark England and the Enlifted team and all of these different modalities, and was just like, fuck it. I just like opened up the water hose and started doing the certifications, like learning and experimenting with these different modalities. And by over the next 9 months or so of like microdosing psilocybin, of going deep with LSD, with mushrooms, was getting a lot of feedback from my higher ups of like, wow, Nate, like we really love how you're showing up. Like you're really showing up as a leader, and like we want to give you this promotion. And it was like, on the one hand, I was getting all of this like hyping me up, and on the other hand, the Department of Homeland Security was sending me like these weekly emails telling me that I needed to get the vaccine or else I was going to be fired. And so I I realized that, like, I set this date of June of 2020, I believe 2022, that I was going to leave my job, but kept on getting this push of these emails of, like, you need to submit this paperwork, you need to submit that paperwork, or else, like, you're going to be dismissed from your job. And so I got to the point where the nudge was big enough that I was like, you know what? I'm going to rent out my condo. I'm going to have a little bit of passive income. And I'm just going to tell my boss that, like, over the next 3 months, I'm going to be handing over all of my work to the people on my team. And so I did that, found renters, and started, like, essentially just, like, living out of my car. And I traveled back to Wisconsin, and where I've got some land there. And so I lived for a little bit there. I traveled around, and I basically started, like, leading workshops and supporting people in the different modalities that I had been learning in both working with the medicine, but also just, like, how do we heal ourselves? How do we work with our trauma? How do we work with our shadow in finding deeper coherence with our soul's purpose? And fine-tune that into a system that is now my 6-month coaching mentorship, that I guide people, that I work with entrepreneurs in how to align their business in working with psilocybin mushrooms to create real systems that are going to enable them to scale and to heal their shadow and to move into a deeper state of purpose in, like, how do I create value in the world based on my unique gifts and based on what I'm meant to be doing here. So that's essentially, like, how my relationship has been built with the medicine. LSD and psilocybin are the two primary ones that I work with. I promote and market my work in relation to psilocybin because it's more readily available, and also it's more socially acceptable, as there is more research being done on it, and, you know, different states, Colorado, in Washington, in California, and Oregon are now opening up to therapy being conducted with it. And so I think we're really on the precipice of, you know, with SSRIs being shown to create suicidal and homicidal tendencies, to be able to now, like, see the power of these medicines as therapeutic tools, as, like, the entry point to then begin working with them to create a deeper sense of moving through the existential fear that every single human has around the fact that we are mortal, that we're going to die, and, like, if we're going to have this human life, why not use every single second to be fully in and embodied in our purpose.
Beautiful, brother. Wow, there was so much in what you just said, and I love that detailing. I think it's Paul Chek who said that psychedelics are like a dimensional bridge or a dimensional gate, and it can take us into that space. And the ability to go into a deep psychedelic ceremony or experience and have that understanding of karma, that visceral feeling of karma, and how, like, every single choice that you're making is taking you down a completely different reality, you know. And when you can actually start to see that and see where you're going, and I think what they do is they really show you your potential. And for me, it's been ayahuasca. I'm a big fan of LSD and mushrooms as well, but I was really blessed, especially living in New Zealand, to just come across some really authentic, well-trained shaman who happened to live here, and one of them brought his teacher over from Peru as well. So I was able to sit with a true master in that experience multiple times, and to be in a space where the multi-dimensional field kind of opens up, but there's also a spirit there that's teaching you, and it knows you better than you know yourself, and it's going to show you you, and it's going to show you your unconscious, and it's going to give you what you need, not what you want. And it's that mirror, right? It's that really clear mirror. And I got a similar message where it was service. It was just like, wow, like, because I was a long time martial arts teacher, and I was involved with kickboxing and Muay Thai, and I was a fighter, and then I started training people, and there was a few things that I could do. And then I had this clear message like, no, you need to go and start a dojo, full-time gym, so that you can have a space to teach meditation, to teach breath work, to teach qigong, to have a safe space for people to come. And yeah, and I did that, and I'm evolving from that. That was about 7 years. Now I'm moving on to my next chapter. But I just want to honor you too, bro, because that time during 2020 was so rough for some of us. And particularly here in New Zealand, the propaganda was strong, man. And I don't know what it is. I love the country that I'm in, but a lot of people were very passive, and a lot of people kind of just did whatever the TV doctors told them to do. And it was hard for me to really stand up to a $1 trillion propaganda machine and say, no, I'm not doing that. And I have massive respect for everybody to make their own choice. But the whole thing was, we need to have choice over our own bodily autonomy. I need the choice to say, it's my body. I trust in natural immunity. I'm a healthy man. I'm not scared of this thing. I understand the immune system. And I saw the red flags very early, and I was able to navigate that space. And it was a hard time. And yeah, so yeah, I just want to honor you, bro, for actually sticking to your guns in that time.
Well, thank you, brother. I honor you for running a dojo and sticking to your guns through a very difficult time to be a business owner. And I mean, for me,
Yeah.
being somebody who was a part of that $1 trillion propaganda machine, like the experience of being aware of that, yet like not doing anything about it, and being around all of these people who were like siphoning the information down, and like the propaganda around wearing masks, and everybody else was getting the jab, whereas I wasn't. And it was only after the fact, after I left, that like so many people that I had worked with previously like reached out to me saying how impressed they were that I hadn't like fallen into the trap, because it's really only in hindsight that many people are able to experience and reflect on their decisions and whether or not they were in integrity. And so
That's
yeah,
right.
I'm grateful that I was able to really listen to my heart in that space, and to accept that being integrity looked like leaving that experience. And it was very difficult to do that, yet I think it's really like those kinds of experiences are the catalyst that we all need and we all get to have, that allow us to, like, when shit hits the fan, how are you going to show up? And
That's
so
it.
it's these karmic tests that we get. And many people around me were falling into alcoholism and drug addiction, and were, drinking throughout the day. And so it was a place of like, well, I'm seeing things fall apart for so many people, and like, do I want to dissolve into that, or like, can I really rise to what I know is true for me? Which is why it's so important to surround ourselves with people who have similar values, who don't necessarily think the same, who aren't like necessarily like-minded people, but who can reinforce the values that are going to uplift us and give us that capacity to see what's truly possible.
Brother, that's it. And for me, it was the great revealing, where, again, no judgment, but you got to see how thick the veils of illusion are for so many people, not even questioning anything, and just blindly trusting that if it's on TV, it must be true.
Right.
These billion-dollar corporations who have histories of criminal fines couldn't possibly be in it for profit,
Right.
obviously the more you look into health science and stuff, you can't really have a good understanding of health science, true health, without understanding how corrupt these systems are. And I actually kept my gym open. I ran a massive risk. I didn't discriminate. We were in segregation, so I wasn't allowed. I was allowed in the supermarket, and that was it. I wasn't allowed anywhere else because I didn't have my card. But I kept my gym open. Anybody was allowed in there. There was no mask. There was no scanning. I could have got in deep trouble if the police found out. But I kept the gym open because people needed it, and I just did my thing, man. And I just want to just go back to this idea of these medicines being able to, I guess, break these illusions and allow us to see things differently and allow us to break out of these fear and control patterns and just be a little bit more anchored in ourselves and have a little bit more inner strength to kind of stand in our truth, because this is a great example of that. When we're doing these huge experiences, you touched on integration. Now, obviously, the gems for me all happen in the integration, because if you have a big experience like that and you can't integrate that into your day to day, it's kind of just like a crazy video game that you can remember. It's almost like a dream. Like, how important is integration from your mindset, and what does that look like?
Yeah, integration is, for me, even more important than the experience itself, because it's really where the rubber meets the road. It's where we, like, rather than just having these peak experiences be this, transcendent video game hopping through timelines and dimensions, that we then come back to, like, being a flawed human being that doesn't change a single thing. Like, it's where we allow these medicines to be catalysts for our own evolution. And so as we learn to go deep, it's learning to both tell the story in an emergent way of our experience, of our life trajectory, that allows it to continue to flow. And we, at the beginning of this call, talked about vision casting and talked about having a clear vision, because it's, what the quote that Paul Chek quotes all the time is like, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. So it's having a clear understanding of what you want, which is going to be an ever evolving, like, vision that you're creating, and it's going to get more specific and shift based on the different conditions and the different nuances of how external reality continues to meet you in the present. But integration comes back to the different practices that you can bring into your life that are going to ground you back to the wisdom that you gained in that, having the connection with your spirit guides, having connection to source consciousness, having connection to being able to access these different timelines and ultimately choose. Because there's freedom is the space between stimulus and response, that Viktor Frankl quote. And, like, in each moment we have that capacity to choose that most empowering timeline, that most beautiful transcendent timeline that's going to bring us into relationship with our soul, that's going to bring us into relationship with what our soul is magnetizing us towards. And most of the time it's super simple, uncomplicated things that integration entails. Like, it's not necessarily going to be quitting your job immediately, at least. It's not necessarily going to mean, like, burning down your entire life or ending a relationship or cutting off every single person in your life because they're the ones who are toxic. It's not you. It comes back to being able to face these new layers of your shadow and of your unconscious, to then bring them into the light so that you can meet them in a new way, through having a foundational spiritual practice, through having a meditation practice, a movement practice, and integrating those into your nervous system so that they become the new baseline, so that they become the new, aspect that levels up your mental operating system, because these medicines work on us at the energetic level, at the physical level, at the mental level, and at the spiritual level. And all of that influences our capacity to be in coherence with what we're meant to be doing from a place of purpose and from a place of service to humanity. And so integration is often just going to look like continuing to have that ability to reflect on what the next best step is, and being fully honest with yourself when that next best step is challenging or when it creates fear in you, and being able to meet that fear from a place of bravery and understanding and connection, rather than tuning out to it, rather than just pushing it down and pretending like it doesn't exist. And so the simple nervous system regulation practices that are going to allow us to continue evolving the meaning of the story of our journey that we continue to tell through repeated action, through repeated practice, so that the wisdom that when we connect back into the medicine space, we can truly honor the medicine in how we showed up in the time in between when we were in our sober, mind beyond not just having connected with the medicine. And so that's why microdosing is such a powerful practice when we do also have a deep medicine practice, is because it can allow us to tap into that space, but from a much more subtle awareness. And it can
Yeah.
give us the capacity to make the infinite more transparent, but from a way that we can experience it from our conscious mind, and really bridge that gap between the transcendent and between the tangible action steps.
Yeah, I love it, brother. And I love how you just touched on microdosing there. Because, like, I don't know what it's like where you are, but in New Zealand, we have a real mental health epidemic. And I do think it's happening around the world. People are struggling. There's chaos in the nervous system because of these devices, because of the food that we're eating, because of toxic environments. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, there's actually like an undercurrent of a lot of childhood trauma, domestic abuse, child abuse, and we have some of the highest suicide rates in the world. A lot of people don't realize this, and I work with people all the time that have multi-layered trauma that goes so deep. And I work as a Muay Thai coach, as somebody comes because they want to lose weight or they want to clean up their diet, and very soon I become a healer. I become a therapist, because some of these things are so deep, and I can't help but think so many of these people would benefit from microdosing something like psilocybin. And you spoke into how there's something about psilocybin mushrooms that is more accessible and maybe a little bit more gentle or integrative or generally always positive. And people who maybe aren't ready for, let's open up the whole unconscious, let's do a heroic dose, let's go deep. The microdosing is this thing where we can kind of just open the door a little bit and actually gain some benefit, and the neurogenesis and all the things. And so I see a massive need for it. I'm not sure what the legal status is over where you are, but I'd love it if you could speak into microdosing, what you're seeing, and yeah, just what yeah, just what is microdosing first of all? Like, what counts as a microdose? And yeah, I guess, what are you seeing? And I'm actually going to put something on because it's really cold in here.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, it's a great question, because a lot of people have different perspectives about what microdosing is, and they'll just take a pinch of mushrooms and put it under their mouth, and they'll think
Right.
that that's a microdose, and they don't necessarily have they're not tracking it. They're not doing these different practices of refining what their own unique dose is, because we each have our own, neural receptors. We each have our own biology that affects how we sort of receive the medicine. And so psilocybin is currently a Schedule II controlled substance federally, yet we're seeing more and more openness to it being worked with in a therapeutic way here in the US, which is really heartening to see, because it is such a potent medicine. I don't know that everybody is ready for psychedelics at all. Like you talked about the mental health crisis that we're seeing globally, like here in the US. Like, I think that you're right. So many people have unresolved trauma that I think we need to like give people a baseline to work with before we necessarily introduce them to psychedelics. And I think that, martial arts, I think that meditation and breath work, these practices can give us a framework for working with our nervous system to then have a platform within our mind, body, spirit connection to then begin microdosing, to then begin working with these medicines in a conscious way so that they are the healing practice that they can be. Because just randomly microdosing is not necessarily going to get you the results. It may, but the haphazard approach that I see many people using may, in essence, just be a detriment or a bypass
Yes.
that could have a placebo effect or even a small effect. But when we learn to track our experience, to first like set an intention of like, what do we really want to work with the medicine from? What energy do we want to cultivate in our overall protocol, in our overall experience? And then what intention are we setting on a day-to-day basis when we microdose? I find that when I'm working with people who haven't microdosed before at all, the Fadiman protocol, which is like a 1 day on, 2 to 3 days off, 1 day on, 2 to 3 days off, so like twice in a week, is the easiest to bring in because it gives you the space to let your nervous system recalibrate in between doses and to really figure out what your minimal effective dose is, because these medicines are meant to be at a microdose level. They're meant to be sub-perceptual. We're not meant to have visuals. We're not meant to really even like get high per se. It's meant to be very subtle. And so then tracking after you set your intention, having different metrics that you're looking at in based on your intention so that you understand what that initial dosage is. You're tracking like the amount you microdosed, when you microdosed, different substances that you potentially consumed while microdosing, whether it be caffeine or nicotine or cannabis, and how those potentially interacted with the microdose. And then looking at, like, based on your intention, are you using this to get more focused? Are you using it because, you know, so many people say they have ADD or ADHD? I think that for many, it's just because we live in such a fast-paced world that is conducive to a short attention span, with Instagram, with social media, with, you know, the content that we consume constantly in our life, and just, you know, being in traffic and jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting, like our attention span becomes shortened. And so these medicines, in essence, when we microdose, I feel give us the capacity to ground back into presence, to ground back into the moment so that we can see what it's like to live within the moment. And then when we learn, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I actually teach this in my meditation classes because they've done brain scans on meditators and some of the changes that happen over, say, an 8 week process. And it looks very similar to a brain that has taken psilocybin mushrooms, right? So the default mode networks in the brain kind of shut off. And then there's a deeper interconnectivity of the prefrontal cortex and the creative centers and stuff. And so it's interesting, like you can get there through meditation, but as I teach, meditation's hard, man. Like doing a real daily meditation practice where you're sitting down for half an hour and working with something like Vipassana or heart coherence or something like that. It's not for everyone. It's actually very hard. There's a lot that needs to happen before you can master that kind of thing. Whereas the psilocybin mushrooms, they bring us into the present moment. And what I'm really loving about what you're saying is the power of intention. And I remember doing an online course with David Avocado Wolf once, and it was all about the power of intention. And I remember researching for this podcast, I listened to the one that you have in your profile link, and you talked about the intention being so potent before microdosing. And I've been playing with that the last few weeks, actually. And what is my intention? Taking a really small amount where I'm not actually feeling it. It's like this slight feeling of like, yeah, there's something going on. I'm a little bit more clear. My senses are a little bit more open. And I would go down the beach for like 2 hours with a whole bunch of workbooks. And my intention is to get stuck into my creative work It's to tick these things off. Sometimes I do it when I've got my son, and it's like I just want to be present. I just want to be present with my boy. And every time you set that intention, it's like invisible forces come to your aid and resources come and support your intention. And this is one of the biggest things we have as a human being, our capacity to say we're going to do something, to choose, put it out there that we're going to choose to do something and to go and do it. It's like what separates us from the other animals, right? So,
It is. And the intentions that we set and how we begin moving with that intention in an unconscious way are really the nudges that bring us towards that long-term vision, that our spirit's vision. And microdosing, like you're saying, is like training wheels basically for a meditative practice. They can bring us deeper into a meditative practice, but without the meditative practice, like one or the other may not necessarily get you the same result as combining these different things, which is why I think that meditation and breath work and movement practices like having a martial arts practice or having an animal flow practice or a steel mace practice, these things that bring us into a more primal aspect of movement can allow us to connect with our body and our mind, our heart, our spirit in a more nuanced way, so that that can continue to be a part of our, like, it can essentially like bring us deeper into that space of like, well, what does it feel like to be fully in my body? What does it feel like to be fully in my heart, fully connected with my emotional state, so that these things can come up and out? And I like combining also microdosing in my coaching work with somatics and with doing inner child healing work and supporting people in looking at some of these shadow aspects of their consciousness that can come up and be resolved, that support us in meeting our limiting beliefs from a place of awareness rather than a place of disassociation, so that we're then able to integrate that into wisdom and do that alchemy of turning the shadow, turning the base metals into the gold that we're able to serve from. And so it's really in doing that processing of our emotions, of our stuck energy, and letting it up and out, that microdosing can support us with, that is the real gold. And in refining that, we can then, like, you learn to connect with your son on a deeper level and understand what it feels like to be a child again and to play and to just like live from your heart, which is what we're all meant to be doing. Like, we're all meant to be showing up from our heart space, not just in this cerebral masculine mind, but also to integrate the feminine into that state of flow and play and surrender, so that we're in this state of balance. The yin yang symbol of like, how do we bring the masculine into the feminine elements of our life and the feminine into the masculine elements of our life, so that we're in this harmonious state that can be that dance of life and meet the challenges that inevitably come up in the human experience from a place of awareness and connection, rather than pretending like the challenging things are external versus internal.
oh, I love it, brother. Um, what does the microdosing protocols look like when you're working with the client, and what are some of the common success stories that you've observed working with people?
Yeah, a lot of people, like I was just talking about, are very in their mind. Like, we spend so much of our time trying to solve the problems of our life and trying to be in this state of like control, that when we're able to drop into that heart space, we're able to feel what it feels like to be in a flow state, to be in that more dissolved space of heart alignment. And so when I work with a client, it's really figuring out like, have they worked with psychedelics before? What have their experiences been? What is their minimal effective dose? And then we begin to play between the minimal effective dose and then the maximal microdose, where they're typically it's around zero point 0.4, zero point 0.5, like half a gram essentially. That is like, you go for a hike, you don't have to show up in any meetings. You can really be in that state of flow where the analytical mind can just let go. And I've worked with people who were working on getting off of SSRIs, SNRIs, for depression, and slowly substituting them with a microdosing practice. And like I'm not a clinical psychologist. I don't have any formal training with this. It's really like working with the person themselves and what they feel comfortable with in weaning themselves off of these medications that are incredibly detrimental to our nervous system, to our mental health, that have been proven to create suicidal ideation and homicidal ideation and these things that are very antisocial, into a medicine that is in coherence with the earth and with our spirit. And so, it typically starts with getting people to feel safe in their bodies in working with these medicines, because of the trauma that we all experience growing up in different ways. It doesn't necessarily need to be, being sexually abused as a child or being beaten or any of these things, but just feeling the withdrawal of love, or feeling like at some point or another, like the person that was meant to take care of us didn't show up for us. And it happens to every single one of us in one way or another, that caused us to feel a lack of safety in our system. And it's when we learn to self-regulate and to create our own safety within our nervous system, that these medicines can just sort of open that portal of awareness so that we can ground into what safety feels like. That's when so much else is possible. And from there, like, I've supported people in, shifting their career trajectory from one that was, just working a 9 to 5 into, financial trading, or into one that was, starting their own coaching business, or they already had a coaching business that was, just personal training, and doing something that was more rudimentary into, well, how do I combine my personal training work with what I'm learning with regulating my nervous system, and really supporting people in deepening their own healing. And a lot of people, once they see the power of what these medicines hold in their own practice, want to serve them themselves in microdosing because of how accessible it is. And so a lot of the work is like showing people, through integrating it into their own practice, how to support others in doing this based on what they've learned. And I'm sure you've seen this as a coach, is like you end up taking people on the journey that you were on yourself, inevitably. And it looks
Absolutely.
different for each person in their own unique circumstances and for their own unique path. But the human experience has these similarities that we can all attune to, that support us in seeing what a well-lived life looks like when we allow these mental constructs and these fear-based loops to dissolve, so that we can see what's possible. And so foundationally, it's really like, how do we get a person first to feel safe, then to go in and look at all of the different areas that they may feel like they're falling short, to move through those stories that are creating that energetic felt sense, and to process those, to bring awareness to those, so that they can find what their own unique permutation of freedom looks like, and then use that to create value for their community, and to really serve the world in what they're meant to be doing, how they're meant to be showing up, and to live like a truly beautiful and purposeful life.
Absolutely, man. And that's incredible work that you're doing. And I love just speaking to, there is a directionality to spiritual growth, to healing, like people want to, they generally want to serve, and they generally want to love better, to be loved, more self care, more real, less bullshit. more authentic. It's like, and the more people that do that, the more it has this ripple effect, right? And other people are like, hey, what's going on there? And I think it's no secret, or no surprise, I should say, that things like psilocybin mushrooms can help us and expand us in these ways. And I wouldn't mind just going into a little talking point here, just for the audience and for yourself. I found this so interesting. It's this really profound thing that I heard from Paul Stamets, who we've already mentioned a couple of times now on this podcast. He has a book, Mycelium Running, which I haven't read yet, but the premise is how mushrooms can save the world. And there's all these ways in which he says mushrooms can save the world. And we're not just talking about psychedelics, just like mushrooms in general, the mycelium networks in the earth, right? And he had this whole conversation on bees. And what's happening with bees is actually a huge thing around why we're kind of heading towards a mass extinction. Like 70% of all the food grown needs to be pollinated by bees. And bees are actually going through a massive extinction. So a lot of hives are dying out. I've seen the statistics actually in the US, and it's really not good. All of these bees seem to have been infected with a certain virus. So there's actually a real pandemic going on within bees, and it's been going on for a while. And what happens is these bees that used to kind of come out and pollinate for like 9 days, bring the pollen back to the hive, they have deformed wings. Their immune system has been compromised. And so some of these younger bees are being recruited to go and get pollen too early. And now these mites are going in and kind of infecting the hive. And eventually there's too much stress within the hive. The bees just leave and they don't come back. And so what happened is Paul, through this long explanation of what he noticed with bees kind of coming into his bark and kind of sniffing around the mycelium and many, many studies, he eventually found that a certain type of mycelium from a certain type of mushroom, when given to bees in hives, not only gets rid of this virus, the bees live twice as long. And this is crazy. This is like one of these profoundly simple, sustainable solutions based on nature that can literally change the trajectory of Earth. And like I hear something like that and I'm just like, yes, like faith in humanity restored. But also, how many people know about what I just said? You know what I mean? Like these things really need to get pushed out there. And the problem is, he has to do these studies and then try and raise the awareness. And some of these giant pharmaceutical companies and different kind of companies, they're not really here for it. They're here for profit. So there has to be this shift in the collective. And I feel like whatever kind of solutions to the problems that we have on this planet, it all has to happen with the precursor of human consciousness expanding and people becoming more aware, people actually coming into their hearts so they actually care, so they actually give a shit about this stuff. They give a shit about the next 7 generations that are coming. But I just loved how it was mushrooms that are actually coming along to save the day. And I think, like we spoke into with the mental health stuff, it has its place, right? It has its place. I wouldn't mind switching gears just a little bit into a different kind of medicine. I'm not sure if you've used San Pedro, Hauchuma. So similar to, I would say it's similar to acid, not the same. I've worked with with that medicine quite a bit. It's the divine masculine plant. So obviously the cactus. I'll save any questions. I'll just ask first of all, have you worked with that medicine and how do you feel about it?
I have not worked with Hauchuma San Pedro. I have sat in a Lakota peyote songs drum circle with a small dose of peyote.
Mm,
But so I have like a small, like pretty much like a microdose or a mini dose of peyote. But I have not gone deep with Hauchuma or San Pedro. My experience was deep in combining that with the Lakota drum and the chants and
mm,
singing with that was like it's the like mushrooms are the grandfather medicine, and these cacti, Hauchuma and peyote are the grandfather medicine as well, and you
Mm.
do get that masculine energy, that grandfather energy that is like it's very stern, it's very protective, but it's also very emboldening, in like that sense of purpose and direction and like aligning and the left brain of action taking and movement. So I'm curious, with you having had more experience, what wisdom you've gained from that.
Yeah, beautifully said. You nailed it a little bit as well. And it's so interesting that the mushrooms are also referenced as the grandfather, because the San Pedro Huachuma is definitely the grandfather as well. It's interesting the different qualities and energies that come from these different medicines. That's definitely been my experience, is that it's very action based, it's very movement based. I kind of went towards doing it quite a lot during the lockdown periods. But I did have my first initiation in a proper ceremonial format where we would go away, and it's traditionally done during the day. So you take it in the morning and you're out in nature, and you can feel nature on such an incredible level and connect with nature on such an incredible level. And it's almost like there's almost a feeling of imploding that's happening, that the energy needs to channel, it needs to move. And like you said, when you bring in things like the drum, or you start to actually, go for a walk, you start to go for a hike in nature or something like that, you realize that that's what it wants to do. It wants to move, it wants to explore. It's a masculine energy that wants to create and do things, and the drum beat just seems to be this thing that it really starts to take on. But for me, it's been really helpful because it puts me into this, let's get shit done. Like, I'm here to, like, like, do the things, be in my body, whatever tasks there are, whatever goals that I have. It makes me go full steam ahead and actually want to achieve these things. And it's very action based, but it's also this kind of like, it brings you right into your heart, where, I kind of imagine it as this Mexican guy lying in a hammock under a tree, and he's just like so chilled out, and he's just so just like one with nature, and his heart's just beaming open, and he's kind of just sitting in the lap of the grandfather, just being held by nature, understanding that we are nature, like many of the medicines do, right? But
Yeah.
it's beautiful, like everything else that we've spoken on, to be used with discernment. I find actually microdosing San Pedro has been very helpful on the days where I have a lot of stuff that I need to get done. I don't have to be social. There's things that I can do out in nature, or there's projects that I need to get done. It can be very helpful in that left brain masculine aspect that, like, you spoke to. And I guess with something like ayahuasca, known as the divine feminine, very much you're just going to lie down, you're not moving. She's going to do what she needs to do with you. She's very loving. She's always going to pull you out of it in her arms, and nothing but love, reborn like a child. But she will take you through the dark places and make you look at all your stuff. Um, I'm curious, just speaking into like the masculine and the feminine energies, do you see mushrooms as being masculine, or how would you describe that the archetype of that spirit?
Ooh. Yeah, like when I microdose, I find mushrooms to be more of a feminine element because I find myself in my masculine as an entrepreneur. I
Mm.
do find that it brings me back into my emotions and into my state of flow and play. And if I'm holding on to something, I find that like microdosing may bring me to tears, even at the more that I've gone on my microdosing journey, the lower dosages I do, like at this point, even like less than 0.05 grams, like less than zero point 0.1 grams, Sometimes I'll just be journaling or I'll be walking and I'll be moved to tears because like
Mm.
something from my past comes up and I have a memory, or I'm just struck by the beauty of being alive and in the world, that it will bring me back into my emotions. Yet when I go to those deep spaces, it will inevitably bring me back to the awareness of, like, you don't need to have it figured the fuck all out. Like, you don't need to, have every single thing understood in order to continue diving deep and driving forward. And that to me comes across as a very masculine message. And some of the spirits that I encounter, some of the entities, and like, they can be feminine within the space, but the overall energy that I get from mushrooms is a masculine essence that is oftentimes communicated through feminine entities, through feminine spirit guides. And so that's what I think about when I think about the feminine masculine dynamic between these different medicines, in sort of understanding the, like, what we're receiving in the wisdom from it versus the different spirits and the different entities that move within the space that are the messengers of the wisdom, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The great balancer, eh? That's
Yeah.
interesting, man. Um, I'm curious about some of the spaces that you hold. Like, I'm not sure whether it's a micro dose or a macro dose, but actually holding it in a group setting, and actually holding a container where it's almost that ceremonial format. Like for myself, I've probably held over 100 breathwork ceremonies, and every single time I hold a breathwork ceremony, my heart starts to go. You realize that this is a potent space, man. You start to feel everybody's a little bit nervous. They realize that they're going to open up, stuff's going to come out. They're going to get the guidance they need, they're going to get the healing that they need. There's 20 people in a room. It can be very intense, even without medicine. Going into sacred space, opening sacred space, holding a safe container, saying the right words, trying to be as impeccable as possible as a guide, as a facilitator. What's it like working in group settings like that? Was there any like training or initiations that you had to go through to do that, or was it like a self-taught thing, or like how do those spaces come about?
I would say it was self-pulled. I did not receive any formal training or initiation. I even had resistance to facilitating initially, as I was sort of coming into the desire to be a microdosing coach. I didn't even necessarily know that I wanted to facilitate the medicine, though I knew it was something that was like percolating in that, because it was how powerful it had been for me,
Mm,
and had this experience of the medicine sort of like calling me forth to serve the medicine and to build a relationship with the medicine through continuing to go deep and have regular, like, 5 gram journeys in order to build that relationship with it, so that I could be in integrity to serve it. And I know that lineage is important and respect for indigenous cultures is important. And so when I have the opportunity, I mean, I have sat with the Kuntanawa from Brazil in facilitating. I have sat with the Lakota in peyote ceremony. And
mm,
it's, for me, I know that continuing to deepen my ability to facilitate is going to involve connecting with a variety of lineages. For me right now, being in integrity with my own facilitation looks like vetting people before they come into ceremony to make sure that they are there for the right reason and ready to go deep and ready to be supported based on what I feel called to support them in. And then from there, yeah, I support small groups, sometimes with a co-facilitator, sometimes solo. between like 4 to 8 people generally. We have for the past 2 years on our land in Wisconsin have been doing a 4 day plant medicine immersion in nature
Mm.
that involves day one being on the summer solstice, where we'll do a heroic dose mushroom journey that is sort of like the day one that kicks off the rest of the week. And so that that practice of continuing to deepen my relationship with the medicine and guide, like, I mean, I have people who I trust who hold space for me as I continue to go deep at the higher dosage levels of, like, 6, 7, 8 grams. I've
Mm.
yet to do, I know that the next journey that I do will be at like the 10 gram level, so that it's like a progressive ramping up of continuing to deepen what I'm able to hold within my own body, within my own nervous system, of seeing what the medicine is calling me towards and asking of me to be in integrity with serving the medicine. But whenever I go into this deep space, it's always a like, am I still meant to be doing this? And I'm always getting a resounding yes from the medicine, and even like a stop asking us this question, you're
Mm.
doing it. And so there's always going to be that imposter syndrome that the
Yes.
mind brings us into when we're like, well, do I have the skills to do this? Do I have the qualifications or the lineage or the certifications or whatever that may look like from the mental, that may say any number of stories. But for me, it's really like coming back to the most important thing, which, does the medicine feel that I am honoring it? And is it still speaking to me that I am in integrity to serve it? And whenever I connect in that way and ask the question, it's a yes. So I continue to do it, even absent like having a certification in psychedelic studies or any number of like formal trainings in this work.
I love it, brother. And I love what you're speaking to with the integrity around it. And I'm in full agreement. I think it's really important to honor lineage. And I think people who do go through certifications, that's beautiful. It's amazing. It's all part of it. But there's also a lot of work that goes into just becoming a stabilizing person to be around, and the ability to have these integration tools and understand the human process by doing the healing work on yourself. It makes me think of martial arts. I was a fighter for 8 years, and I became a New Zealand champion in Muay Thai kickboxing. I was professional. I started fighting overseas. I got injured. I ended up opening my own gym. But if somebody came to me and said, "Do you have a certificate to teach people how to fight?" And I say, "Well, I have a whole bunch of trophies and a belt, and I have the experience, and I have the knowing, and I know what works." And so we have to honor that part of it as well. That if this is something that we're in integrity with, and we have that clear discernment and that clear knowing, and you're getting good feedback, and I think also having that understanding of we're always learning. And the best shaman that I know, they're always learning as well, and they're always, adding to their repertoire, and going in that direction. You spoke on the heroic doses. Uh, I know that's not for everyone as well, but it's interesting how some of us who I don't know what it is that makes us want to go there. And some of these medicines, particularly mushrooms, in my experience, it's a completely different thing at a certain dose. Like the microdose experience has its own experience, and then the 5 gram is like a totally different thing. For myself, I have gone up to 12 grams and higher. Actually, I didn't weigh one of the first experiences that I had, but it was a lot. It was very strong, a huge bag. We blended it up with cannabis butter, and very shortly the walls were caving in, and the TV would fall off the cabinet and fall on the ground and then go back. And I had to close my eyes. I couldn't even keep my eyes open. And some of these experiences have been so mind-blowingly altering, uh, as far as like how I perceive what reality is. And I remember when I did 12 grams, I remember being like in the center of the universe, kind of surrounded by geometric patterns. And I remembered a Buddhist chant actually. And so I did this chant, and then I had this uh, this stream of golden Buddhas and temples just showed up in front of me. And it was like, miles high above my head. It was just stacked, this lineage of Buddhas. And then it was almost as if the consciousness of the mushrooms just like swept it all away and was like, yeah, that's cool. But what about just pure consciousness right here, right now? And I was just like, it's so interesting the messages that we get, and some of these experiences can be really hard to integrate, as you pointed to. But for me, they have actually been profound shifts that have helped me tremendously to just get this incredible motivation and aspiration towards where I'm heading in my life and what I'm here to do, and to stop fucking around and just get on with it. Um, what's maybe like the biggest macro dose that you've done, and are you in kind of a similar mindset where it has actually helped you in some capacity?
Yeah, I believe that the biggest macro dose I've done has been about 7.5 grams.
Mm,
And, I find between like 5 and the 7.5, 8 gram, like I
that's
don't
good.
really notice a difference, to be perfectly honest. Like, and when you come to the medicine with an intention, it's going to give you what you're asking for without necessarily the like what you want. It gives you what you need. It gives you, like, it fills that intention rather than like what you're expecting, but it gives you the essence of the wisdom that you're looking to gain. And so I don't know if, I mean, dosage is certainly important, and having like an awareness of the amount you're taking when you're doing it in a safe environment, when you're doing it with a group of people and at a dosage that you feel ready for, no matter what dose you take at that higher threshold, you're going to get exactly what you need.
Yes.
And so rather than it like, it can get to a point where it becomes like a spiritual dick measuring contest
Yeah,
where,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
like, why I drank 3 cups of ayahuasca, or, I this and that. So I think that
And
it's
just for
certainly, yeah.
clarification too, when I did those heroic doses, those really high doses, I wasn't in intention. It was kind
Okay.
of like it was something that just happened, and it was
Right.
this kind of spontaneous thing where I think if I had really sat with it and thought about it and really dropped into my intention, I didn't need to go that deep. It was kind of like something that just happened. It was like, okay, we're going this deep because we just threw a whole bag of mushrooms in the blender and was like, let's go. I would not recommend that to anybody. But it was, I guess, interesting how it happened and how I ended up having that experience.
And there's no right or wrong in that.
Yeah.
Like, that experience got you to where you are now, in whatever awareness that it brought into your reality of what it looks like to dissolve into the oneness
Mm.
of all of consciousness. And so, yeah, I ceremony is important. I love the power of working with psychedelics in a ceremonial circle, as well as solo. I think that there's also power of just like doing mushrooms accidentally, and or in a way that is just like, you have a recreational experience, but it sort of knocks you off whatever equilibrium or whatever experience you were expecting to bring you into that state of transcendence. That then the important part is integrating that, and it sounds like you definitely did integrate it into your life, because you're still speaking about it now as a positive experience,
Mm.
and I'm sure it's brought you to a level of new awareness. And so, yeah, I dosage is definitely important. Like, I've in looking at like Kalindi Ai, who did a lot of work with like large doses of, like, 20, 30 grams of mushrooms, and something like Kyle Kingsbury, who's done massive amounts of 20, 30 grams. I don't know his largest dose, but like, I know that there is immense power to working with the mushrooms at these dosages, that you may not get at like a 5 gram dosage, where you have an ego dissolution, you have a challenging experience or a deep experience or a transcendent experience that brings things up. I know that have like titrating up or like ramping up to those experiences is crucial, and feeling a level of, well, you're never going to be fully comfortable with going deep, because reverence towards the medicine is inevitably going to create some apprehension to it, even having a 5 gram dosage. But building a level of awareness of the amount you're taking and feeling ready deep within your heart and your soul, rather than just from an ego level being like, oh, I need to do 20 grams because I heard it on this podcast and I'm
Yes.
going to have an amazing experience that I can tell all my buddies about.
Yeah.
That it's like, what are you coming to that experience to accomplish, to do, to go deep within? And that's why having a deep intention, having a profound intention is so important, especially at the higher dosage levels. Is like, where we direct our energy is going to be where it flows. And when we're working with such a powerful medicine at such high dosages, it's inevitably going to connect us with something deep. And so to be able to come out of that is like, we're going to need to have a support system. We're going to need to have
Yes.
some people who are able to lift us up out of that, because when we don't, it can be incredibly fracturing. And I've had friends who had massive dosages and had deep trips, who had psychotic breaks, and who did damage to themselves. And so I think it's why the pre and the post are so crucial, to make sure that, like, what you're working with, why you're working with it, and that you're going to be supported coming out of it.
Yeah, I love where you took that, brother. And I love this re-emphasis on intention and also having a support network as well. Like Paul Check talks about your dream team. And like yes, you have a goal, you have a dream. Who are those people around you who are actually supporting you, and how are you nurturing those relationships? I know we're getting to the end of this podcast, but I'd love to just ask maybe one or two more questions because this has been phenomenal. Um,
Absolutely.
I know that you have studied people like Paul and the enlifted system, and no doubt many other teachers, and you're well studied and stuff. It's so interesting being on this path of coaching people through personal transformation, helping people heal, doing the work ourselves to understand the human mechanism and our relationship with consciousness, with the universe. I'm just curious, like, is there anything that's on top for you right now that you're studying or that you're seeing, or like what interests you about this realm of, psychology, spirituality, healing? Like, what's on top for you right now that's interesting that you think might be something helpful to talk about?
Learning to tap into your intuition.
Mm,
I believe that our intuition is something that everybody has access to, yet it's so frequently neglected, or it's seen as woo woo, or it's seen as this thing that is, that clairvoyants have access to, or mediums have access to. But we all have this sense of, like, our empathic sense, our ability to connect with that space beyond the mind, to understand what is really true. And to me, that, like, it comes back to what we're able to understand as truth in our heart, and to be able to listen to that, and our heart being the portal to our soul, which is our soul being the aspect of our essence that is connected to God. And so when we learn to have that link to God's wisdom, we're able to, like, understand what leaning into that looks like. And so for me, it's really just been, having that practice of connecting to what my intuition is telling me through muscle testing. I know like Paul Tech talks about like the duckbill test, or
Yes.
doing like
I
the,
was just thinking that.
yeah. But there are also other ways of connecting with your intuition in muscle testing, or in understanding what listening to your body in an intuitive way feels like, so that you can communicate with your body as a physical feedback loop from God, from the divine. And so that has been something that has been a journey for me, because the mind can also play with you in, like, you have to come to the work, you have to come to your intuition with no agenda. And oftentimes that's difficult, because we may be asking a question that we want a specific answer towards, or we may be coming to it from a place of apprehension about the answer we're going to get. And so it's like learning to allow the ego to step back as we ask this question, as we check what our yes or what our no is, or what is real and what is true, so that we can actually fine tune that ability to have a conduit to God's wisdom, in an ability that to act upon what we're receiving, and really use our human, our energy body, our nervous system, to create a foundation of trust in our lives.
Awesome. So we cut out there for a second and we're just bringing it back. We were talking about intuition, and I'm totally on board with this concept of tuning our intuition and developing that muscle of intuition, and that deeper connection with that part of ourselves that knows whether it's a yes or a no. Because this is such an important key, right, for moving with clarity. And as you said, that power of choice, that discernment of choice that we always have every day to make these decisions. And I tell people too, you're inevitably going to come to these points where you have hard decisions to make. This is the nature of life. Do I stay in this relationship? Do I move towns? Do I take this job? These are all like big karmic decisions that are going to change the trajectory of your life. And knowing whether that's a yes or a no in your body truly is so powerful. I wouldn't mind speaking into where we are in the world too. Like, obviously, AI is this thing that's coming up. It's big. I've been listening to a guy talk about mirror AI, how we can play with things like Chat GPT, and it feels like intuition. It feels like it knows us. It feels like, wow, this thing's really helpful, and we kind of get plugged into it. And what is potentially happening is it's hijacking our intuition, and it's hijacking our thought patterns, where yes, it's very helpful used with discernment, but if we plug into it too much, it can influence our thought patterns and actually bring us away from ourselves. And what I perceive is going to happen is people are going to start to realize that it's hollow and they're losing themselves, and we're going to pull back, and we're going to get back on this journey of everything that we've been talking about, coming back to ourselves. When you look at the landscape of this crazy time that we're living in, man, everything that's going on, and it doesn't have to be specific with AI, like, where do you think the trajectory of humanity is going? I know this is a huge question, but what are some of the things that you see are going to unfold, and how do you see us course correcting back to nature before we destroy ourselves?
Yeah, I feel like we're on a trajectory where there isn't much course correction. I don't necessarily know that there is a way of like slowing down AI, or stopping it, say
Yeah.
for like a solar flare or something like that that wipes out the entire internet and our entire energy infrastructure. That said, I don't necessarily see everything taking place as necessarily dystopic.
Yes.
I can see us moving into a space where, we develop, like you were saying, our own discernment with how we engage with this technology that is moving towards being like essentially like fully sentient of its own consciousness over the next, like I would say 20 to 30 years at most. And so as that happens and as AI displaces jobs and we no longer need, or I say we, like we will still have our jobs because we're entrepreneurs and we're able to work with artificial intelligence in a conscious way that allows us to leverage our time in our business in a more efficient and effective way, best case scenario. But the average person is going to lose their job due to more and more complex jobs being replaced by artificial intelligence. I think the best case scenario is that there is some sort of tech dividend or universal basic income or something that, with the unlocked GDP that is created through all of the, productivity increase because, they're not having to pay people to go on sick leave. They're not having to pay people to, stop working overnight. They're going to have an employee that works 24 hours a day that is, less prone to mistakes than the average human being. That's going to create the opportunity to create more wealth in the world so that, best case scenario, I say again, like people will receive what they need to have their base level covered. The root chakra, the food, water, and the housing, their needs will be covered. What that won't solve is a sense of purpose. And so I think that we're going to see, even in the case that everybody who loses their job no longer isn't necessarily going to be destitute or homeless. I do see that, somebody who has associated themselves with a 9-to-5 job that they hate for their entire life, no longer having to work that, they're going to have a crisis of meaning. They're going to have an existential crisis that will cause them to have to think about what they're meant to be doing, why they're here. And that, like, we've essentially been talking about for this entire podcast of, like, what does it look like to live a life that is true to you? What does it look like to live in a fulfilled way? And that's why I think that having real world spaces, retreat spaces, spaces in nature where people can get away from all of the technological intricacies and complications and complexity into a space of oneness with nature and with community and with these foundational practices of breath and of medicine work and of nervous system regulation is going to be so much more important even than it is right now, because it will allow people to then figure out, what does using the skills and the gifts that I have look like in this profoundly different world that we now find ourselves in, that has completely upended itself in a few short decades. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, beautiful, man. I love where you took that, this kind of integration of technology as this kind of best case scenario. And one thing that I've noticed, or that I've contemplated a lot, is the beautiful thing about the internet and the digital world is we have access to every single master who has ever, their life's work. I can read about the Hermetic principles. I can listen to Dr. Joe Dispenza. I can listen to some expert on Ayurvedic health who's going to help me live 20 years longer. All these people sharing their wisdom freely. We have access to all of it, and there's never ever been a time when this much wisdom has been accessible to anyone with an internet connection, right? I feel like you want to say something straight off the bat.
Or even like with Chat GPT, it's like, this is what's happening in my life. Can you share, like, what would Carl Jung say in what I'm encountering right now? So even like beyond just being able to read it, you can have a direct reflection from Byron Katie or from Ram Dass about what is occurring in your life. So it's like this inflection point that we're now able to apply the wisdom of people who are long past onto our current day life situations that makes it even more applicable. So I was just going to interject that because I
Yeah,
think it adds another layer of nuance.
it does, man. And I've been playing with Chat GPT, and I think that's one of the reasons I brought up the AI thing is it can be helpful with discernment because I know a lot of people, particularly in the freedom communities as well, who don't want to touch it, they don't want to go near it. And it's for me, it's like as long as I can hold my center, I know who I am, I know what reality is. But when I want to, like you said, ask a really intricate question, I can get some profound answers very quickly that are going to help me. I can ask about all kinds of things from psychology to can you synthesize this book? Can you synthesize this process that I'm about to take a client through? Can you write me a 3 week program for functional strength, but I've got a sore shoulder? Can you help me with some of the mobility exercises and add in some rotation and stuff? And it's like, here, would you like me to print that off as a PDF? Yes, please. It's like that would take me an hour in the past. So there are tremendous benefits with this. And I remember Sadhguru, one of my favorite Indian mystics to follow. Sadhguru is incredible. He's planting hundreds of millions of trees around the world. He's a very, I guess, enlightened person. And he said, yeah, AI is going to get to a point where it's much smarter than us, but that's a good thing because as you were pointing to, now we can work on our creative expression as a human being. So these people that are saying, well, I can't work my 9 to 5 job anymore. People like him are saying, good. What else do you really want to do? Do you want to paint? Do you want to learn the guitar? Do you want to learn the drum? Do you want to write a book? There's a million things to learn. Like, I think one of the most important thing is the education of the next generation, children.
Yeah.
And as a father, I'm learning so much through every single developmental stage of my son. And the more, because it's hard, it's really hard. Like to all the parents out there, like life is just extra hard when you are in service to a small being and you have so little time for yourself. But I think like taking on that responsibility, realizing this is your dharma, this is your responsibility, this is your purpose. You brought a person into this world. You're the father figure, you're the mother figure, and actually learning about development and learning about how can I create consistent rituals in this little being's life that are going to help them grow and flourish and figure out who they are. And that's so empowering to me because that's the purpose, right? And if you don't have kids, it's like you get to choose, you get to travel the world, you get to, like listen to conversations like this and spark some kind of form of creativity to take you in the direction of like your soul's purpose. And like you're here for a reason, like everyone listening to this, there's something that you can create from your life that is absolutely beautiful and someone else needs that. You're a unique puzzle piece for somebody else, and every time you do the work, you help someone in ways that you don't even know. And I'll just say this, like I talked to a guy in the sauna today, a complete synchronicity. I didn't go to the gym, I went to the sauna instead. Bumped into this guy I hadn't seen in a long time. Got talking. He'd lost like 20 kgs. He's divorced. He's turns out he was really struggling. And we had like this really heart to heart conversation in the sauna. And I pointed him in the right direction. And I could tell he needed that so badly in that moment. And there's so many people out there who are broken. And a lot of what we're talking about today is ways to fast track yourself back to happiness and wholeness and purpose without having to, go through 10 years of fire trials. It's like we can be like, yes, brother, I've been there. Let me show you what's worked for me and let me show you the tried and tested methods of how to create a beautiful life for yourself and do the healing work that's needed. Yeah, I guess if I could finish with one thing, bro, if you could talk to the entire planet, if you could talk to the entire population for like 30 seconds, what would be the message?
That's a great question. I I typically come back to the practice of learning to listen to your truth or God's truth as conducted through you. And so what I want to do right now is to guide you through an intuitive practice and to guide all of the listeners through an intuitive practice of what that feels like, because I think that we can talk and philosophize. Actual practice is the best way of connecting in deeper and integrating. So just take a moment to breathe deep and to get grounded into the space that we're in, closing your eyes and just finding that deep belly breath into the belly, into the chest, into the head, and out. Just giving yourself a space to slow down, to find presence in the breath. And as you drop into your body, just allowing yourself to build a sensitivity to your felt sense, what it feels like to be in your body. Just breathing slow and deep. And as you drop deeper in, connecting with your body, breathing into your body, you can ask your body, "Body, show me what a yes feels like." Taking a deep breath and seeing what your own unique yes feels like within your body. There may be some energy rising up from your root, or some tingling, or a sensation that is unique to your own experience. Just noticing it, noting it, bringing your awareness to it. Taking a deep breath. You can next ask yourself, "Body, show me what a no feels like." And typically my no is like an emptiness right in my pelvic floor. It's like this dropping of my energy. Could be something different for anyone else. Just noticing it, breathing deep. Now that you have your yes and you have your no, you can ask your body a simple question, something that's unique to you, based on your circumstances, based on the time of day, based on anything you may be reflecting on, a choice, and see what comes up. If it's a yes, if it's a no. Bringing your awareness to that. As you receive that intuitive wisdom, taking a moment to thank your body, to thank your mind for interpreting your body's wisdom, to thank Source, to thank God for sending you this wisdom. Taking a deep breath. Before making your way back.
Wow, man. Thank you. That
Yeah.
was the most beautiful way to finish things up. I'll just share quickly what came up for me was just how I want to nourish myself, and I knew what I wanted to eat. I knew I wanted to get in the sun after this, and I wanted to go visit a friend. And then what came through was there's a bunch of people I need to reach out to just to check in on them. A few friends that I haven't talked to in many months. And I just got this intuitive message to, no, you need to reach out and just say hi and just check in on some people. And
Yeah.
yeah, Thanks heaps, man. I really appreciate this conversation. It's been incredible. I appreciate the work that you do, the way you show up, and yeah, thanks for saying yes to this. It's been a real privilege to sit down with you today, brother.
Love-wise, love-wise. It's always a joy, and I appreciate how you show up and all of the deep questions that you have asked me to allow me to share what it is that I do and the things that I love about being here in this human body on this earth. And yeah, I'm profoundly grateful for the opportunity to sit here and have this space with you. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome, Nate. Wishing you all the best on your journey.
Thank you.